As you didn't know, you were going to be on the television show this morning, but welcome to the Marlon Blake Show. Yeah, get excited. So my name is Marlon Blake, and I serve as one of the assistant dean of students. I'll talk a little bit more about my role later on in our next session, but today we'll be talking a little bit about first-generation parents and families, and I do want to say, in part, that our session today is really focused. Our intention was to talk about first-gen parents, but I definitely think our session will also be beneficial if you have a first-time student going to campus. So a couple things I want to lay out to you is that our campus at St. Thomas is a first-gen forward institution. We got that designation last year. And in short, that basically says that we do good work to support students who are first generation at St. Thomas. And so generally speaking, 1 in about 5 students at St. Thomas are first gen students. So we have a good amount of students on our campus who are first generation. And that's also a very growing population throughout the country as well. And so we'll continue to see more first generation students over the next probably decade or so, generally speaking. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ways in which I think can be a support, how you can be a support to your student, and then we'll open it at the end of have a few time for if people have questions. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm a Southerner by trade, so I can start preaching. So we kind of set this context about first gen is typically people who are the first to go to in their family to go to college, in particular about a 4-year university. And with that being said, first generation also includes people who, if their parents graduated from a university in another country as well. But first gen is particularly just kind of get this working definition. Because often, sometimes when people are like, well, what does that actually mean? And that's what it actually means. So how do I think and why do I think this is important for you? Well, one of the things that we understand and know is that parents and family members are important supports for their student. And I think more often than not, when your student, they don't show it to you. They may not say it. Their voice may get a little good deeper, right? They want you to be involved with them. And so I think it's important that you at least have some context of understanding about how you might be a support to them. So one of the things I first want to talk about is change, right? You've probably heard the idea that the only thing that is constant is change. Well, that's going to be no different for your student over the next couple of years, right? That if you think about it in the last few months for them, for some of them, they went from literally graduation parties in high school to like preparing for orientation. And in 4 hours, they'll go from like having no schedule to a full schedule to like in a month and a half, they're going to be back here like ready to go to college. Like everything is rapidly changing for them over this time. And that's not going to change for them. Every year is going to be another level of change as they continue to move throughout our time here at St. Thomas. But what I want to lay out for you in really talking about your student in this first term is about the W, right? And the reason I bring up the W is that I think when your student does call you, that it gives you a good barometer about where they might be at in transitioning over the semester. And for some of us, like me, and if we have time, I'll tell you the story at the end of it. For some of us, that happens very quickly. And for others, it takes a little bit of time. And so this W starts out at the top of the W called the honeymoon stage, right? So how might this look for you? Your student might call you and they'd be like, St. Thomas is the greatest place ever. The food is great, the people's great, the atmosphere great, everything is the most awesome place ever, right? We're in that honeymoon stage. Well, then the next part of that W, they may call you and they may say, St. Thomas is the worst place ever. I hate my roommate, the food is terrible, the weather is horrible, all of it, right? We move from being the greatest place, Disneyland, to the worst place they've ever been to, right? And so this is when they first get this initial shock of college, that they're transitioning to this new lifestyle, things are different for them, they're trying to navigate these old relationships and these new relationships. And so we find students go from this honeymoon to this kind of first shock of like, oh, this is different, right? So then you'll find over time that when your student may call you, they may say, you know what, St. Thomas isn't that bad of a place. Like, it's okay. It's not bad. It's okay, right? And so now we get our first initial adjustment to college. The students start to get a little bit of a routine. They have some friends. They have a student org they're involved in. They feel okay about this. Well, then we get to this time typically for a lot of students and for me around Thanksgiving. Right? You go home, you're back sleeping in your old bed, running with your old crew. Things are great. And by the time Sunday rolls around, they're like, well, do I really need to go back? Do I really need to go back? And you're like, yes, you really need to go back to college, right? So students now start to feel kind of isolated, right? They feel like they're on this island by themselves. And typically Thanksgiving break can evoke that for them, because now they feel like I'm the only person experiencing this thing, right? And again, they're trying to waver through these old lives and these new lives that they have. And then we get back to the top of the other part of the W, where students are like, you know what, St. Thomas is cool. I love it. It's a beautiful place. I can see myself being successful here. And so, again, the reason I bring up this idea of change is that your student, right, is going to go through these waves over the next several months, right? So when they call you and you're like, you're a little emotional today, like you just liked this place last week, right? That's normal. That's the ways that they're going through in this. So when they do call you, you have some idea of a barometer about like, okay, this is where they are, right? This is how I may be able to support them in this moment. Because again, one of the things that's only going to be constant for them is change over the next couple months. And change for you as well. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the next thing I want to encourage you to do is to really talk with your student about financial aid. One of, not just at St. Thomas, but in general, most people leave college because of money. It's not that they don't feel connected. It's not that they don't like the place. It's most of the time it comes down to dollars and cents. Now, one of the things some of you may have been learning and learned very rapidly, some of you may have learned that you had to go to orientation today, last week, right? And you're like, oh, we got to go to orientation? Sounds good, right? So what you're going to continue to find out is that your student is going to hold a lot of information that you're not always privy to. And part of that has to do with the money, right? And I'm going to say this later, right? There's always somebody who calls me like, well, I paid the tuition. I need them. Okay, well, thank you for paying the tuition. That's great. But you should go talk to your student. And your student holds a lot of the information you're going to want to know over the next 4 years. So part of that starts with the money. If you're not sure about what they've gotten back in that financial aid package, right, I would encourage you to talk with their students like, okay, what does the financial aid say? Or what did it tell us? Do we need to connect with the financial aid advisor to understand what we might need to be paying come the 19th, right? The bill is due the 19th of every month. That's why I said the 19th, right? So money is going to be a big driver to your students' experience, right? When the money is a little bit unsure, they are a little unsure, right? Then we get in this Maslow's hierarchy thing, right? When the needs aren't being met and they're worried about like, where are we going to pay this $5,000, right? It can then trickle on to these other things within their academic career. So I want to encourage you as much as possible to talk with them about financial aid. Okay, so you have a job. This is the balance. This is what you're expected to pay, or this is what we can contribute to that. So I definitely want to encourage you to talk to them about financial aid. I also want to encourage you to work on campus, right? For some students, this may not work, right? For some of them, they have to work full time in order to help you to pay for this experience. And so I understand that that's not always true for all students. But if all at possible, encourage them to work on campus. One of the things we know about students who work on campus is that they're usually more often to stay at our institution, and they're more likely to graduate when they do have an experience of working on campus. And most of that has to do with them being connected to people who work at our institution. So their supervisor may say, well, I know you have midterms coming up, or how was that final the other day, or how are you doing on that homework, or maybe you should go talk to this person, right? So with them working with someone on campus, they have a connection to the university. And I'm not saying that Target doesn't care about them, But Target isn't going to always know where to direct them when they're having trouble, right? And so I definitely want to encourage you, if they can, is to work on campus. And I wouldn't say a benefit, but typically most students who work, like those who stay under basically like 30 hours, most are like 20 hours, actually do better than students who work full time. And most of our jobs limit the amount of hours they can work in a week. And so they wouldn't be spending all of their time working here comparative to if they were working somewhere outside of that. So I want to encourage them to work on campus. And oftentimes in their financial aid, they get work study, which gives them an opportunity to be able to work on campus. And so that's why I put those two together, is because typically work study comes in their financial aid package. So I would encourage you later on today, there's a financial aid workshop. You should go to it. You'll learn a whole lot about financial aid. So the next thing I want you to do is to encourage them to be involved on campus, and if at all possible, come visit them here, right? Don't let them young adults come back to your house, all right? We'll talk about that in a little bit too. But the first 6 weeks of them being here is the most important weeks they'll ever have at this institution. The first 6. You want to encourage them as much as possible in the first 6 weeks here to find a sense of identity and groundedness. So encouraging them to be in a student organization. How are you connecting with your friends in the residence hall? Are you making connections with your faculty members, right? Are you finding a place? Have you been to a sporting event? You've been to a soccer game, a football game, blah, blah, blah. Are they finding community within those first 6 weeks? And so when you're checking in with them over the first couple weeks, I want you to be keen to this idea about encouraging them to be involved. Their involvement at the end of the day is going to benefit them in more ways down the road, right? Being able to be in student organization, taking on leadership positions. But we're talking about in the first moments of being here. Because sometimes we have a lot of students who are homesick, right? They miss their friends. They miss being able to pet the dog. Like even the simple things about like not knowing where the streets are, right? They come here and they be like, well, where's Cretan? And they're like, Cretan? Right, it's right there, right? So even those small things about not even knowing where you are in location can be alarming for some students and evoke certain emotions. And so I want you to encourage them as much as possible to learn this environment that they're in. What is the local place they like going to eat with their friends, right? So encouraging them to do those things and to be involved and be connected to this campus in the first 6 weeks, I think is really important. So if you find yourself in there like, I really miss you, I want to come home, you're like, you know what? Let's all just go to a football game together. Or let's do this in St. Paul together. We can come have brunch on Sunday. It would be great, right? So in those first 6 weeks, I want to encourage you as much as possible. If you really get the urge to have a visit, come visit them here. Meet their friends. Have them take you on a tour, right? If you haven't been so, or I don't know. Have them take you places on campus to help you, like, what you've been learning? Where are your classes? Take me over there. Show me the building, right? So I want you to encourage them to be involved, but more importantly, if you find yourself coming here, like, be connected. Ask them to show you how they've been learning that experience. But again, I want to say to you, the first 6 weeks are by far the most important weeks they'll ever have at this institution. And that's true across, like, any institution, but we at St. Thomas, right? So the next 2 things I want to talk about together, right? Being engaged with them and being their best cheerleader. All right, so as I mentioned, I didn't say this earlier, so I'm going to mention this now. So going back to this quickly about this idea of change, one of the things you may notice over the last couple months and the months moving forward, that there may be a little change in their voice, right? They may be a little bit more short with their answers. And you might be a little bit more frustrated with each other. There may be a few more arguments that are going to be happening over the next couple months, right? Now, that is normal, okay? And I'm going to explain to you why that is normal and why this matters about being their best cheerleader. It matters is because at the end of the day, when you drop them off here in early September, late August, right? It is much easier to kick somebody out of your car, right? Who you are mad at, right? It is easier to do that than to have a lovey-dovey, beautiful relationship, right? It's much easier to get rid of them when you're mad at them, right? And it's the same that goes for them. It's much easier to leave your house if they're mad at you, right? So if you find yourself over the next couple of months having a few more arguments than you normally have, you're like, you was being nasty today, right? Just know that isn't coming from a place that they don't like you. More often than not, they don't understand how to communicate that they are going through a change, just like you are. And you do the same thing back to them, right? Right? So I say all that to say that there may come a time over the next couple of months that you might not feel like they want you to be there, right? They don't want you to support them and to be on this journey with them. But deep down inside, they do. One of the things we know for sure is that when anything goes south, anything, right? The first person normally they're going to call is a person who has raised them, okay? I grew up in Mississippi. I went to school in Colorado. My mother taught me how to wash clothes when I was 12 years old, okay? I got to college, forgot. I was like, what is this thing? Like, I said, Mom, what water am I supposed to use? I literally did not I didn't ask my RA. I didn't ask my roommate. I didn't ask anybody in the state of Colorado. I called all the way to Mississippi, right? And I called my mom. Well, can you remind me how to do this, right? So deep down inside, and me and my mother, we had some arguments before I left home. I want to be clear about that, right? But she was the first person I called when something went wrong, all right? And so when your student encounters a challenge here, the first person they're going to call is you. Even if y'all ain't talked in weeks, just know they always come back to roost, right? So they may not show it, but they want you to be involved with them. And so I want you to always be their best cheerleader, right? Because they're calling you because they want you to be with them. And I want you to be engaged as their cheerleader. My mother did not know what a midterm was, what a faculty advisor was, blah, 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 blah. She didn't know none of that, right? Well, when she did call me, she would always say, how are classes going? You making friends? All these little basic things that they've been doing their whole lives, right? When you first drop them off at summer daycare, it's the same thing. You're like, did you make a friend today? It's the same thing, I promise you. It's no different, right? They're just a little bit older, but you're going to ask them the same questions. I think sometimes we complicate it. It's not complicated. It's the same thing. Are you making friends? How's the connection going? You been eating your food? All the things, right? So my mother would call me, how are classes going? Great. They were not going great, by the way. We're on video, but my mother, I almost got kicked out of college. But I'm just saying, I told her they were going great, though, but they wasn't. But, right, are you making friends? I was having a ball, having a great time. She's like, is you eating? Gained 15 pounds. But, I was doing all those things, but my mother knew, the basics. She just asked me those things. She was engaging me, right? And so I definitely want to encourage you to be engaged with your student because they want you to be engaged with them. So ask them how things are going, how's the transition going, etc. So I definitely want to encourage you to have them to be their best cheerleader because they want you to be involved, and when things go south, they're going to call you, right? So be their best cheerleader, give them the most optimism, the support, go over to tutoring. Encourage them, remind them that they belong here, that it's all okay, because they all get caught up in those grades things, but we won't talk about that. So I want you to be engaged and be their best cheerleader. The last two things is about being a good partner to your student. Now, over the last 17, 18 years, you could always say to them, be home by 11 or else, okay? I just want to be clear. They are no longer living under your roof, all right? So that whole thing is not going to work anymore. So I'm going to encourage you to be a partner to them. And what does it mean to be a good partner? So when they call you and they say, well, I think I want to go to Lake Havasu. You say, well, how does Lake Havasu play into how this exam is going to look next week, right? Or do you have Lake Havasu money? We still got a balance left over, right? Help them to think through what this means, right? How are you being a good partner to them? They're going to make decisions you don't agree with. That is what it is, right? But I think being a good partner with them, say, okay, that's what they decided to do. I'll continue to be a good cheerleader, and I'll support them along the way. All right? Now, the other part about being a good partner is also about your own boundaries, right? You are adjusting to a new lifestyle too. Less noise in your house, one less mouth you might be feeding, one less run to a volleyball game, football game, piano practice, right? You're also adjusting to your own life, right? Your new life. So I think being a good partner is that also setting good boundaries with them, right? My mother just took my house key. I was a guest, all right? That was the boundary. It was real clear that I needed to call before I showed up, right? That's what it was. But I also think it's important that you're going through an emotional shift too. So I think in your partnership with them, you also need to set good boundaries. If y'all decide y'all finna run a Cozumel for the weekend, hey, we're going on vacation, right? That's your new life. That's what you're doing, right? But it's about being a good partner and communicating with them in your partnership together. So one day when you call them and say, well, I want you to come to Aunt Susie's 95th birthday party. And they say, well, I got to study, all right? You know, like, what, you don't like us anymore? It's not that they don't like you. It's just that they have a life here. They need to study, right? And being a good partner is understanding their experience as well. So generally speaking, right, for every credit hour you have, you should be studying 3 hours for that credit. So simple math, most classes here are 4 units, right? So 4 times 3 is 12. So for one class, you should be spending almost about 12 hours, right, for that one class outside of your class period. So you start doing the math really quickly, right? That start equating to a full-time job, right? So we're talking about almost somewhere around 40 hours plus should be dedicated to studying if you're in like 16 credits, which most students here are, right? So when they say to you, well, I can't go pick up my little brother, or I can't come help run the family business, or I can't do this today because I have a student organization meeting, or I need to study. Just know in your partnership that they might actually be telling you the truth. It has nothing to do with you. It's the fact that they need to be dedicating that much time to studying. So I want you to think about in your partnership with them, how can we benefit? It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So instead of coming home for the whole weekend because you want to spend time with them, they just say, how about you just come home on Saturday or Sunday afternoon, right? Create a partnership that may work for you because for them, they may have things coming up. So I definitely think in this partnership, you need to set good boundaries for yourself, and you also need to set good boundaries about their experience that they're having here too. And I think that's what partners do together is try to have good communication and collaboration. The last thing I want to talk about is the academic calendar. And if you don't remember anything else from what I said today, this little thing right here is it, okay? The academic calendar will be your bestest friend, okay? The academic calendar lays out every deadline at this institution, lays out when classes start, when they end, when they have midterms, when you can get 80% back on your tuition if they drop a class to 40%, right? It lays out all of the things that's important for you and how your student is experiencing our campus. So for example, let's talk about how this may play out in practicality. So your student calls you in the first couple of days of the semester, and they're like, ooh, psychology got off to a rough start, right? Like, ooh, right? So if you're keen with the academic calendar, in the first start of the semester, if a student drops a course, there's just no notation on their transcript, right? There's just like you never took the class, right? Well, as the semester goes on, right, and that date gets closer to the end of the semester, if a student withdraws from that course, then they ultimately get a W, right? They get a W. It just says you got a W on your transcript, meaning you withdrew from that course for whatever reason you withdrew, right? But that goes on your transcript. W's don't get factored into GPAs or anything like that, but you get a W on your transcript. Now, typically near the end of the term, right around Thanksgiving, around that time, there's a deadline called the last day to drop with the W, okay? So let's just say that date is November 19th. I don't know, but I'm making up the date. Let's say it's November 19th. Well, let's say your student calls you on November 17th, and they're like, well, I don't know about this. Like, I think I can pass it. I'm not sure if I can. Well, if you are looking at the academic calendar, you may say to your student, and being a good partner, saying, hey, the last day to drop with the W is the 19th. So maybe think about it over today, and let's make a decision tomorrow, right? Because if they drop that class after November 19th, they get an automatic F. Don't matter if you got a D in the class, a C minus, an A, you just get an F after that standpoint from withdrawing in the class. So after 19th, they should just stay in the class because they would get an F if they left it, right? So those are the things that in the academic calendar that can help you to be engaged with them and to help your partner make some good decisions, right? So if you're saying, oh, if you drop from this class, we can get 80% back in our tuition, that's great on that day, but if you wait another 24 hours, that goes to like 60%, right? So the academic calendar can help you to make some really good decisions along the way. So the last thing I'll say about this academic calendar, we only get 2 days for Thanksgiving. Don't call me that. Yes, Thursday, Friday, that's it. So if you're planning your family vacation, just go look at the academic calendar. It will tell you all the things you know about when your student should or should not be in class. So if you planned your family cruise to Italy on the Wednesday of Thanksgiving break, they need to talk to their professor about that. But the academic calendar will help you to make some good decisions about your family vacation of when they can go and when they should be back, right? So the academic calendar, and I should say lastly, the academic calendar is already laid out for the next 3 years. So you can know all the dates about the next 3 years already if you just click on the academic calendar. So I think these things are important for you about change, financial aid, being engaged with them, academic calendar. So any questions? Any questions? I know it was just that good. All right, so we got 3 minutes. So I want to tell y'all 2 things about when your student calls you about something else that's not up on this calendar. So a lot of students, they may say to you like, oh, I want to take a class during J-term, right? That's a winter term for us, or summer. Well, it is true that during J-term and summer, tuition is 50% off, but financial aid typically doesn't cover those 2 sessions. So when your student says to you, I want to take a class or something during J-term, right? Just know that they would need to come up with those funds in order to do that, because financial aid typically doesn't cover J-term in summer always. So just want you to be mindful of that, all right? So I want to go back really quickly and tell y'all one funny story that's going to be on camera, right? So y'all remember when I was talking about that change, right? How you go from the honeymoon to like the I hate this place? For me, that happened within weeks, all right? So I went to school in Colorado, like I told y'all, right? So I get there having a blast. Whew, good time, folks, okay? So one night I go to sleep. I still remember September 13th. I go to sleep. This is 2 days after my birthday. So I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning. I'm like, it's kind of chilly, right? So I look out the window, and I'm like, there is snow on the ground out here, right? I called my mom. I was like, I hate this place. They don't have grits in the dining hall. It's already snowing. You got to walk everywhere, right? I hate this place. I want to come home. My mother said, you'll figure it out, and hung up the phone, right? And that's how quickly my change happened from this honeymoon to I hate this place. For me, happened within weeks, right? But my mother's advice about figuring it out, I figured it out eventually. But I'm just saying that, like, for some of us, that change is going to happen in weeks. For some people, it may take a little bit longer. But for me, it only took 2 weeks. When that snow hit the ground, I was like, all those emotions I was masking by having a good time came up. And that snow was the last thing that did it for me. It was a beautiful time. So just know that change can happen very quickly for some students. So with that being said, I thank y'all so much for your time today. Study abroad is happening in this room next, so you just stay here if that's what you're going to do. But thanks so much for your time. Yeah.